Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear. This time on Guitars and Gear, we are joined by guitarist extraordinaire Pete Thorne. Pete,
nice to meet you.
Thanks for being here. We appreciate you coming by.
Absolutely, pleasure.
You're here on behalf of Boss.
Absolutely.
Going to be doing a webinar on the pedals and the amplifiers and things, and lots of cool sounds coming from this stuff.
Yeah, they've got some exciting new pedals out, and they're multi-dimensional processing pedals, so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no doubt. Look forward to hearing what you have for us when you go through the webinar. So that's going to be great.
Yeah.
So you got started. You're from Canada originally, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. How did you get started playing guitar?
Oh, let me see. This fellow moved into my neighborhood, a few doors down. He was a cool kid. He played guitar, keys, and he had a huge record collection. And I was a couple years younger than him, and I just thought, wow, look at this guy. He's got so much talent, and it just really struck me at I think I was about 10 years old, and he would have been about 12, but really, really advanced musically already. So he showed me a few chords on the guitar, got me into listening to some cool music and stuff.
Right.
And kind of sent me on my way. And then I started taking lessons from a great jazz guitarist named Brian Hughes, who's got a stellar long jazz career at this point. But he was like a local guitar hero in my hometown.
Right.
And so I started taking lessons from him, as well as a fellow named Terry McDade. And when I was about 14 years old, I'd already kind of made a decision to move to Los Angeles and go to Musicians Institute. That was my goal.
Okay.
So at 19, I graduated high school and took off and headed for LA, and
right.
that was it.
So you went through Musicians Institute,
yeah.
Studied there,
yeah.
And then just kind of watching as your career's grown, it looks like things have kind of stepped and progressed to where you've reached the point you are now with sideman work that you're doing and your solo work that you're doing as well.
Yeah.
How did you kind of get started doing those gigs? How did you work into that position as a sideman to the stars, if you will?
Well, I guess I started out like a lot of guys, just kind of playing in my own bands and writing songs and stuff, and going at it from that angle. And I'd been through a couple cycles of forming a band, writing a bunch of songs, demoing, that kind of thing. Eventually getting a record deal, and then the band kind of ending and it dissolving, not sort of really taking off and going places. But at least
right.
It kind of got me my start in the music business doing that. And maybe around '97 or so. Was when I hooked up with my first real tour gig, which was Adam Cohen, Leonard Cohen's son. He's a great writer and got some really cool projects that he's been doing actually recently. But way back in '97, that was my first touring gig.
Okay.
And it was interesting because there's a fella in town that kind of helps people find musicians. I'm speaking about in LA here. There's a fellow named Barry Squire, who's kind of well known to all the LA musicians. I don't want to say he's a headhunter, but kind of it's kind of what he does is he hooks up bands with musicians when they need somebody. So I got in with him, and he was really, really helpful in my career. I take it really seriously. I mean, learning the parts and getting the right tones and all that kind of stuff. And it just sort of seemed like the sideman thing was a good fit for me because of that.
Right.
Because that's kind of what, I have this philosophy about, getting gigs and how I do it and whatnot. And it's basically, you've got an artist, solo artist, or maybe a band, and they've completed an album. They've maybe spent 6 months or a year working their butts off on this thing. They know it inside and out, every note.
Right.
And if you go in the room with the right sounds and the parts dialed, it bodes well for you. It's kind of, for their ego and just for the, that tension leading up to a record release, and they want it to go, and So if you go in with all that stuff covered, they're going to see you and go, wow, this guy really cares. He cares about my music, and
Sure.
Really do. So that was a good fit for me because I'm just kind of meticulous in the way that I go about tones and parts and stuff. I want to get the right tones and the right parts, and so the sideman's thing just kind of worked out.
Yeah, it's not really a place to go in there and show off yourself in that regard. It's really more you're there supporting the artist and playing their music. So I think guys make that mistake, is that they think this is a spotlight gig for them to do that. And certainly you get your time in the spotlight. I don't mean that, but
yeah,
it is their gig.
You're absolutely right. You're there to be of support, to support the artist in any way that you can and to the best of your ability, and that's the most important thing to keep in mind, when you're going out for gigs like this. I've heard stories of guys going into auditions and saying, "Oh, I really didn't have time to work on the songs, but maybe you just want me to solo over top of your stuff. You can hear what I do, And it's like, that's not going to get you the gig. I mean, maybe 1 out of every 100 gigs would be like, yeah, go off and do your thing,
Right.
But yeah, for the most part, I find going in there with
the parts dialed, the right sounds, and just that being supportive attitude is the angle.
Do you find that once you've gone in and shown them that you can play their music as it was recorded, do they then sometimes say to you, you know what, I want you to kind of take this where you would take it and put your own stamp on it? Do they give you that room?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I remember auditioning for Melissa Etheridge, who I currently play with, and I'd probably 6 songs or something were at the initial audition. That was what I was supposed to learn. So I did that, got a call back to come back and do the following day. And that night when I went home and they called me and said, okay, Melissa, why don't you come back and play tomorrow? Can you learn this one song called An Unexpected Rain? And I went and I listened to it, and it's basically a really spacious jam with a lot of room for soloing and just kind of doing your own thing. And I listened, it was Philip Sayce that recorded it. He's a fantastic guitar player. Just in listening to it, I went, she doesn't want me to learn this note for note. She wants me to do my thing, because Philip's just improvising on it. You can tell he's just playing from the heart. So when I went in and she said, let's do Unexpected Rain, I just kind of went for it. I didn't really, I just sort of, and she's like, that's what I wanted you to do, So you can kind of tell. Definitely it's helpful to have your own voice. And just knowing when to use it, that's all. Knowing that, using good taste and whatnot, knowing when those moments are is really important.
Right, similar to the way a session player has to approach it as well. It's the same kind of thing. You're there to do the sessions and
absolutely,
and support the music that way too. So
yeah, it's really similar. Except many times the parts are already laid out for you in advance with the sideman thing.
Right.
But yeah, definitely when those moments come up to take the spotlight and do your thing, just being tasteful about it and knowing what's the right thing. I mean, the tasteful thing might be to play a million notes. It depends on the band, I guess.
Sure, and the song, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
So
you through the course of your career, you played with Jewel, with Chris Cornell, Don Henley, and you mentioned now Melissa Etheridge.
Yeah.
And you've also been working on solo music.
Yes.
You released an album in 2011, correct?
Yeah,
Guitar
correct.
Nerd. Can you tell us about that?
It was really, really, really exciting for me to finally put out my own thing, and it's been just really gratifying. And it all kind of culminates at a time where, for me, the record business has gone through so many changes, and you can kind of do your own thing now. And I've got my own studio, and with the advances in equipment and whatnot, the stuff you can do at home is, as everybody knows, just stellar.
Right.
So I tried to strike a balance of still working with other people and whatnot, and not have an entire record where I played everything and programmed everything and that kind of thing.
Right.
But just really exciting for me to be able to do exactly what I wanted, without inside influence of, we want you to be like this or that,
Right. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's been fun, a real learning process.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Speaking of learning process, you're also a great educator. Both of us write columns for Premier Guitar Magazine,
right.
And you are also very well known for the gear demos that you're doing on YouTube. How did you get into doing that kind of thing?
I think it's all just going towards the internet with there's value definitely with print media and ads and that type of traditional advertisements. But you can look at an advertisement in a magazine for, say, an effects pedal or an amplifier or something, look at it on a page, and maybe somebody's endorsing it and there are pictures there, and that tells you a little bit. But when you can go on the internet and actually hear something recorded well and demonstrated well, if you're in, Iowa or someplace or Delaware or something, there's not necessarily this certain boutique pedal or amplifier available in the local music store, and you got to plunk down your cash over the internet or whatever to get this thing sent to you. It's sure helpful to have some kind of idea of what you're getting into through an audio or video demonstration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've checked out a number of your demos, and what I really like about them is that you take a very real-world approach to them, and you have that background of you're playing live, you're out doing it,
right?
And so the credibility, I guess, that you bring to that is very powerful. In particular, I really enjoyed your review of your pedal board that you had put together, and actually stole some tips off you there.
Oh, cool.
So that's cool stuff that you're kind of taking the real-world approach to it. As opposed to, so some of the demos are a little more glossy. Let's just put it that way.
Right. Well, I've tried to, even with the gigs that I'm doing right now and whatnot, bands are still trying to save money no matter what, I'm finding. So budgets have shrunk and whatnot, and the more you can do with less in a smaller space is, so I had used a wet, dry, wet rig with a rack and 3 speaker cabinets and all this stuff for a number of years, and I thought I got to downsize, so I built that new pedal board, and I thought maybe some people would like to know what I've gone through.
Yeah.
And this is where I've arrived is at this board and why I chose the things I chose and whatnot. So, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
You have access to, or have had access to, try a lot of different things, a lot of cool pieces of gear. How do you select what goes on to your pedal board? Are you looking for things that do one specific thing, or are you looking for things that are going to cover a broad range of things for you?
Well, it's a little bit of both. I mean, there's some units on that board of mine that do multiple functions, and as long as they do them quite well, then I'm totally open to using that type of pedal or processor. And then there's other things where it's obviously just a one sound kind of, that's what that pedal does. And
right.
I'm kind of open to it all. I'm not really, and it doesn't. I'm not like a. People think I'm maybe pickier than I am. I'm not like a staunch analog guy or a boutique guy, or it doesn't have to be. I'm a big fan of the Boss pedals. And they're fantastic, and they get the job done, and they're indestructible. So there's a lot that I like about that.
Sure.
So I'll use whatever it takes to get the job done, and through a lot of trial and error, though. I mean, I am in this position now where doing the gear demos. You're right. I'm really lucky. I get to try a lot of stuff. So.
Yeah, which is fun.
Yeah, it's really fun. And as you know, fortunately these days, it's like there's so much great stuff out there that it's rare that I come across something where it's like, I don't even really dig this. I can usually get, something that I like out of just about everything that's coming out these days.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it's whether it just fills a specific need that you have, or a space that you have within the musical texture you're trying to create, whether it's the one for you or not.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Right.
That's all it is, and that's how I decide what's, You only got so much space on these pedal boards. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit. You went through Musicians Institute, and doing the sideman thing, how important is versatility to that? Can you go into that and just be a rocker, or do you need to have the jazz background like you have, or do you need to be able to play a variety of styles?
I think being able to play a variety of styles is helpful, and then it can also, cause you issues at getting some gigs, because I've had some things where people say, I don't think he's the right guy, he might not, especially with rock bands, like in the rock and metal idiom, it's like a lot of guys, like I grew up, Van Halen, AC/DC, and like,
sure.
The Who, and that's what I was into, was straight up rock and roll. But people who might have seen me do more sort of roots gigs or, roots rock kind of gigs or a certain thing, and then you might get stigmatized a little bit, like, I don't know if that guy's rock and roll enough for my band. Right. So that's actually happened to me a couple times where people have been like, yeah, he's good, I just don't think he's maybe the right guy, So right. Like being jack of all trades can maybe not necessarily get you the gig at some point,
Interesting.
Yeah, that's actually happened. So,
yeah.
But obviously, being well-rounded is, probably in the long run, I don't really read music. I'm terrible at it. I want to learn.
Sure.
And I'd like to pick up some different instruments. I'd like to learn piano and, just keys in general, maybe drums and stuff at some point. Those are all things that I'd like to be able to do. Right. So I feel I could be way more well-rounded stylistically and just, music knowledge in general. So.
Open up a few other doors.
Yeah, I feel like it never ends. It's always, it sure can't hurt.
Right, and there's always something to learn.
There's always something to learn. The more you play, the more you realize it's just like, man, I don't know anything.
Right.
But it's great because it's a lifelong, it's a lifelong thing, playing music and guitar and whatever instrument you're into, I guess.
Right, right. So how important is personality in getting the gigs that you get?
It's huge.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's 50%.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. Nobody wants to be on a bus with somebody that's a pain in the butt, for like a year, or you're
Sure.
in close quarters, and that's a good thing to watch out for when you go into auditions. It's just being a nice person, being cool, and it's funny because I went in, I had an audition for one of my gigs, and I'd gotten the word about the audition the night before. And it was, I had to learn 5 songs and then go in and do the audition at noon the next day. So that was like...
high pressure.
Yeah, high pressure. It was about 11:30 at night. I was in the studio doing a session, and I found out about this audition. I literally had to go home about 1 a.m. and somehow learn 5 songs between 1 a.m. and noon the next day to do the audition.
Wow.
So I go in to do the audition, and and it was going great and everything. And at some time, on a break, it was funny. The artist's wife came up to me and said, "Oh, you're really good. You sound great." And I was like, "Oh, cool, thanks." I was like, "Yeah, I just didn't have a lot of time with the music and whatnot. So I hope it's, And it was funny because about a year later, she told me, you know, I almost thought you were complaining that day at the audition that we hadn't given you enough time.
Right.
And I said, no, I was just saying I hope you like what I'm doing, you know, because I haven't. And I thought, you really got to be careful what you say and how you say it, because it can definitely impact your chances of getting a gig. It's like a job interview like any other, really.
Sure.
Yeah. So you want to go in with your, you know, put your best foot forward, play great, absolutely, but be humble and just be a nice person, you know, have a good sense of humor, shake everybody's hand, and just say thanks for having me. It's definitely helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you mentioned having to learn 5 songs, and it sounds like about 10 hours. Do you have any tricks that you've developed for picking up a lot of music quickly?
Taking breaks is good. You know, every 45 minutes or so, just get away for 5 minutes and go for a little walk, or, you know, go drink a glass of water or something, then come back to it. I find for me, learning music, I have this curve where it's like, if I need to learn a song, it's tough for me to do it in one day and then remember it, like maybe later that night or the next day.
Right.
It's really helpful if I can learn it, you know, maybe get ideally I would get like the gist of the song, you know, get away from it for a little bit, maybe come back later that day, revisit it a little bit and maybe get a little more into it, and then maybe come back the next morning and go over it again. And then I find it's in there after that.
So you don't find you're charting things out or doing, you know, chord progressions? Or
Sometimes I chart, but I try not to.
Yeah.
Once again, I'm not a great reader, so some guys, you know, they can
notate it all.
Yeah, but even guys that are good readers, I find, you know, you can tend to rely on charts. Like you could be the best, you know, chart it out, and then those sometimes are. I mean, maybe it's just my own jealousy of people that can do that stuff. But sometimes I find it's tough for guys to get off the charts. You know?
Right.
You know,
Sure.
So I like to get it in there just by ear. I'm really a kind of a street, you know, by ear player. Even though I went to MI and stuff, it's still that's where I'm most comfortable.
Well, clearly it's working for you.
I guess so. I do some of these gigs, and it's like I'm definitely the most undereducated musician in some of these bands that I play in. You know, and I'll always be like, "Look at you! You're in the same band as me, and you had to go to school for 8 years." But they can definitely outplay me. Some of these guys I'm with. I'm humbled to be in the room with a lot of the musicians I get to.
That's
play,
cool.
so.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Congratulations on all your success.
Thank you.
That's a wonderful thing. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you.
We're going to be talking about the Boss pedals in a webinar here coming up, and the amplifiers as well. So we're really looking forward to that.
Me too.
Thanks a lot,
Great
Pete.
to be here. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm Mitch Gallagher. Thanks for joining me for Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear.